Every single generation of the middle class has followed the same playbook. Go to school, get a good job, save your money, buy a house, invest for the long term, retire comfortably, and every single generation has watched that playbook deliver less and less. In 1985, the median American home cost roughly 3 times the median household income. Today, it costs 5 times. In 1990, tuition at a public university was $3,800 a year. Today, it is over $10,000. In 2000, the average 60-year-old had $280,000 saved for retirement. Today, after adjusting for inflation, it is less. Here is what nobody tells you. The rules you have been taught to follow, the rules your parents followed, the rules every financial guru repeats, were not designed to make you wealthy. They were designed to make you a productive participant in an economy that needs consumers, or not owners. Here are 10 of those rules. 10 things the middle class believes are the path to financial security. 10 things that are actually the trap. This is rule number 1, the most sacred rule in personal finance. Save 10 to 15% of your income, invest it in a diversified portfolio, and you will retire comfortably. Here is the math they do not show you. If you earn $70,000 a year, which is above the median income in the United States, and you save 15%, you're putting away $10,500 a year? Let us say you start at age 25 and do this every year until you are 65. At a 7% annual return, after 40 years, you will have approximately $2.2 million. That sounds like a lot, but here is what that $2.2 million actually means. At a 4% withdrawal rate, the so-called safe withdrawal rate, that gives you $88,000 a year before taxes. 40 years from now, assuming just 2.5% inflation, $88,000 will have the purchasing power of roughly $32,000 in today's dollars. You sacrificed 15% of every paycheck for 4 decades to live on $32,000 a year. That is not a retirement plan. That is a 40-year sentence. And that math assumes you never lose your job, never face a medical emergency, never go through a divorce, never have your portfolio cut in half during a bear market right before you need the money. The rule was written in a world where pensions existed, where housing cost 3 times your income, where college did not require a second mortgage. It was not updated. It was just repeated. The real number for anyone who wants to retire with actual financial dignity is closer to 30 to 40%. That is the gap between the advice and reality. This is the most emotionally charged rule in the entire playbook. Your parents bought a house, and it went up in value. Their parents bought a house, and it went up in value. Therefore, a house is the best investment you can make. Let us look at what the data actually says. From 1991 to 2024, the Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index appreciated at roughly 4.4% per year. Over that same period, the S&P 500 returned roughly 10.2% per year, including dividends. That is not a small gap. Over 30 years, a $50,000 down payment in the stock market at 10.2% becomes $920,000. In home equity at 4.4%, it becomes $182,000. But the gap is actually wider than that, because a house does not just cost you the purchase price. It costs you property taxes, typically 1 to 2% of the home's value every year. Insurance, maintenance, roughly 1% of the home's value per year on average. Interest on the mortgage, closing costs, selling costs. Robert Shiller, the Nobel Prize-winning economist who predicted both the dot-com bubble and the 2008 housing crash, has shown that over the very long run, going back to 1890, the real inflation-adjusted return on housing is approximately 0.4 to 0.6% per year, barely above zero. A house is not an investment. A house is a place to live that you hope keeps up with inflation. The middle class has been taught to call consumption an investment, and that confusion is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make. The rule says, keep an emergency fund. Keep it safe. Keep it in cash. This sounds responsible. And for 3 to 6 months of living expenses, it is responsible. But here is what the rule does not tell you. Cash is not safe. Cash is a guaranteed loser. Since 1971, the year the United States left the gold standard, the US dollar has lost approximately 85% of its purchasing power. 85%. A dollar saved in 1971 is worth roughly 15 cents today. That is not safety. That is erosion with a different name. And in the last 4 years alone, the dollar has lost more than 20% of its purchasing power. The money you had sitting in a savings account in 2020, every dollar of it, now buys you 80 cents worth of goods. The middle class is taught to fear volatility. But the real risk is not short-term price swings. The real risk is that your money loses value silently, predictably, every single year, while you feel safe watching the number in your bank account stay the same. You are not protecting your money. You are watching it die in slow motion. This is the rule your parents believed in most deeply. Work hard. Get promoted. Earn more. Save more. That is how you build a life. Here is what actually happens when you earn more from a job. Every additional dollar you earn from a salary is taxed at your highest marginal rate. If you are in the 22% federal bracket, plus state income tax, plus FICA, Social Security and Medicare, you are losing roughly 30 to 40 cents of every extra dollar to taxes before you ever see it. But that is only half the problem. The other half is lifestyle creep. You earn more, so you spend more. The slightly nicer apartment, the slightly better car, the slightly more expensive restaurants. It feels like progress. A study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that as income rises, perceived needs rise almost perfectly in lockstep. The treadmill speeds up, but you stay in the same place. The tax code is not neutral. It punishes earned income and rewards capital gains, dividends, and real estate depreciation. The person earning $100,000 from a salary pays more in taxes than the person earning $100,000 from qualified dividends and long-term capital gains, sometimes 2 to 3 times more. The rule tells you to climb the ladder. It does not tell you that the ladder is bolted to a treadmill. This rule feels morally correct. Debt is bad. Get rid of it. Then you can start building wealth with a clean slate. The problem is the math. Say you have $30,000 in student loans at 5% interest. You have $500 a month to put toward either the debt or investing. And the market, historically, returns roughly 10% per year before inflation, roughly 7% after. If you put every dollar toward the debt first, you pay it off in about 5.5 years. Then you start investing. After 20 total years, your net worth, investment portfolio minus the interest you paid, is approximately $192,000. If instead you pay the minimum on the loan and invest the difference from month 1 after the same 20 years, accounting for all the interest you paid, your net worth is approximately $227,000. That is a $35,000 difference, just from understanding that a 5% cost is not the same as a 10% opportunity. And that math gets even more lopsided when you factor in something the rule never mentions: time. The single most powerful variable in wealth building is not your savings rate. It is not your return. It is time. Compound growth needs decades to do its work. Every year you delay investing to pay off low-interest debt is a year you steal from the end of the curve. The years where the math gets exponential. The rule feels responsible. But feeling responsible and being right are not the same thing. You have heard this one 1,000 times. Skip the $5 latte. Cancel the subscriptions you do not use. Pack your lunch. The small leaks are sinking the ship. This is the favorite advice of people who have already made their money. Here is the real math. If you skip a $5 latte every single workday for 30 years and invest that money at 7%, you end up with roughly $90,000. That is not nothing. But it is also not the difference between being poor and being wealthy. Meanwhile, the average American household spends roughly 33% of their income on housing. A decision about where you live, one decision, made once a year or once a decade, moves the needle more in a moment than 30 years of skipping lattes ever could. The latte advice is not wrong. It is a distraction. It teaches the middle class to obsess over $5 decisions while making $50,000 decisions on autopilot. It teaches you to feel guilty about small pleasures while signing 30-year mortgages and 72-month car loans without blinking. The wealthiest people do not skip lattes. They optimize the 3 or 4 decisions that actually matter: where they live, what they earn, how they invest, and how their income is taxed. Everything else is noise dressed as discipline. The 60-40 portfolio: 60% stocks, 40% bonds. It has been the default advice of financial advisors for half a century. The idea is simple: stocks for growth, bonds for safety. Rebalance once a year. Sleep well. In 2022, something happened that was not supposed to happen. Stocks fell. Bonds fell. The 60-40 portfolio had its worst year in nearly a century, down roughly 17%. The safe part of the portfolio did not cushion the fall. It amplified it. Why? Because for 40 years, from 1982 to 2021, interest rates were falling. When rates fall, bond prices rise. That tailwind made bonds look like a brilliant diversifier. But that tailwind is gone. And here is the deeper problem with the 60-40 rule. It was designed for pension funds and institutions that need to preserve capital and generate income over fixed time horizons. It was never designed for an individual who wants to build wealth from scratch. At 7% blended returns, $10,000 a year invested for 30 years gets you to roughly $945,000. That is mathematically similar to what we calculated in rule number 1, enough to retire on, barely, if nothing goes wrong. But nothing ever goes perfectly right for 30 straight years. The rule gives you the illusion of a plan, but it is a plan that assumes you never need the money early, never face a decade of flat returns, never get forced to sell during a downturn. It is safe on paper. It is fragile in reality. This is the crown jewel of middle-class financial advice. Max out your 401k. Get the match. Invest in the target date fund. Forget about it. What they do not tell you is what happens when you need the money. Your money is locked behind a wall called age 59 and a half. Need it at 45? Here is your 10% penalty plus ordinary income tax. Need it at 55? Same thing. Life does not wait until 59 and a half to throw emergencies at you. But the bigger problem is what happens at the other end. Every single dollar you withdraw from a traditional 401k is taxed as ordinary income. If tax rates are higher when you retire, and with $30 trillion in national debt and unfunded liabilities in the tens of trillions, the smart bet is that rates go up, not down. Then you have spent 40 years deferring taxes into a higher tax bracket. You thought you were being smart. You were actually making a bet on future tax policy. And it is a bet you cannot afford to lose. And the fees. The average 401k plan charges between 0.5 and 1.5% in total fees, fund expense ratios, plus administrative fees. At 1.5% annually over a 40-year career, fees alone can consume roughly 28% of your total returns. The 401k is not a retirement plan. It is a tax deferral vehicle with a lock on the door, sold to you as freedom. The middle class has been trained to obsess over a 3-digit number. Pay your bills on time, Keep your utilization low. Do not close old accounts. Your credit score is your financial reputation. Here is what a credit score actually measures. It measures how good you are at borrowing money and paying it back. That is it. It has nothing to do with your net worth, nothing to do with your income, nothing to do with whether you are building wealth or destroying it. You can have an 850 credit score and a negative net worth. You can have no credit score at all and be a millionaire. The credit score system was created in 1989 by Fair, Isaac and Company, now called FICO. It was designed by lenders for lenders to help them decide who to lend to and at what rate. It was never designed to serve you, and yet the middle class has been trained to treat this number like a moral report card. The wealthy do not obsess over their credit score. They obsess over their assets, because a high credit score lets you borrow more, and borrowing more is not the same as building wealth. This is the final rule, the finish line. Work for 40 years, save responsibly, and at 65, you get to stop. The problem is that the finish line keeps moving. When Social Security was created in 1935, the retirement age was set at 65. At the time, the average American life expectancy was 61. The system was designed so that roughly half of workers would never collect a dime. Today, life expectancy is 77 and rising. The retirement age has barely moved, and Social Security's trust fund is projected to be depleted by 2033, at which point benefits would be cut by roughly 20 to 25% across the board unless Congress acts. But the deeper problem with the retire at 65 rule is what it does to your mind. It teaches you to defer your life, to trade 40 years of your most energetic, most creative, most capable decades for the promise of 15 or 20 years at the end. Years when your health may be declining, when your energy is lower, when your options are narrower. The rule does not ask whether there is a better way. It just says, wait. And waiting is the most expensive financial decision you will ever make. Here is what you need to understand. These 10 rules do not fail in isolation. They fail together. They form a system. Save 10% so you park it in a 401k, in a 60-40 portfolio, while you pay off low-interest debt and skip lattes and obsess over your credit score and wait until 65. Each rule reinforces the next. Each rule makes the next one feel logical, responsible, inevitable. And the result is a life where you did everything right and still ended up somewhere you never expected. This is not a failure of effort. It is a failure of design. The financial system does not need you to be poor. It needs you to be productive. It needs you to earn a salary, taxable at the highest rate. It needs you to borrow money, generating interest for lenders. It needs you to spend driving corporate earnings. It needs you to save in tax-deferred accounts, locking your money away until a future date when politicians will decide your tax rate. The system is not evil. It is not a conspiracy. It is the natural, predictable, mathematically inevitable result of an economy that was designed by and for institutions, not individuals. The rules were written before you arrived. You were handed the playbook and told it was the only playbook. The question is not whether you were misled. The question is what you do now. The first step is the hardest. It is not changing your investments. It is not starting a business. It is not buying real estate. The first step is simply this: recognize that the playbook was never yours. If you see it, you cannot unsee it. The wealthy do not follow these 10 rules. They understand them, and then they do the opposite. That is not a coincidence. That is the entire game. If you want to understand what they do instead, the actual math, the specific strategies, the framework that replaces the playbook, subscribe to this channel, because that is exactly what we are building here, one rule at a time.